everyone. You're welcome to another episode of Relationships with Adenyke. This episode is one of our series on Behind the Pulpit. This is where we get the opportunity to talk to senior leaders in the ministry, in church, and just to talk about issues around marriage. We get to have a sneak peek into their lives. And today I'm so excited to have with me the senior pastors or the lead pastors of Elevation Church, Pastors Godman and Bola Akinlabi. Thank you for coming to the show.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. It's quite nice to have both of you here. I always enjoy our Behind the Pulpit series because it helps us to just get to know who the man and who the woman are behind the global church, the global ministries. And we're looking forward to a very lovely time with both of you. So on Behind the Pulpit, let's start off with, how did you guys meet? I don't know if I should have you, Pastor Bola, first respond. What was it that drew you to Pastor Godman? How did you know this was the one for you?
Interestingly, the first time I noticed him, remember noticing him, we were in church, of course, typically. We were in church, but I was taking a class. Okay. It wasn't the regular church service. I was taking a class and I just saw him walking past. I guess he was going to teach a different class from the one I was in, and I just noticed this young man, walking briskly, to his class. But I just thought, look at those bow legs.
Oh,
his bow legs, really.
I know she was going to say something about
I wasn't expecting that,
actually. I walked or something, I was expecting that. Actually,
his bow legs. And I thought, who is this guy? And I just kind of followed him with my eyes. Okay. Until he went to his class.
She was admiring the bow legs.
I was admiring.
I think I was
admiring bow legs. And but it was so uncanny. I remember I was supposed to be focusing on my class.
Yeah.
But it wasn't quite a voice, but I just got this impression, that he's a good man. But that's all I got. That's all I heard. I didn't hear thou shalt marry him. Right. Thou shalt. There was nothing like that. Yes. I just had this really strong impression in my heart that he's a good man. Now, we've been married for almost 15 years, and there have been so many things to test that word. Days when I'd go back to God and said, what did you say he was? Good? But often and again, I find myself going back to that very first kind of introduction. Right. It was like God introducing him to me. That
even before you.
He's a good man. In spite of the rivers you will swim through, in spite of all the challenges you will go through, because we have been through quite. You'd think that God speaking like that would mean it would be smooth sailing and would just click. Oh
exactly.
No! Oh
it didn't
no!
really happen.
Oh no!
Well, that's interesting. So that's quite very rarely actually. Do we first initially have the ladies actually just spotting something? Yes. So let me see if Pastor Godman's account would be a bit more.
Well, my first meeting with her, I think I was walking out of the church. Then I was pastoring at Daystar Christian Center in Lagos, and she was coming into the church, and I just saw her, and I was like, oh, fine girl, that kind of thing. And so I called a friend of mine who is also an associate pastor, who was an associate pastor there then, and I was like, do you know that babe? And I was like, yeah, you want to meet her? I can introduce you to her, that kind of thing. Then I had nothing in mind because I was in a relationship.
Okay.
I just felt she looked good. Yeah. She walked very elegantly and had a bit of finesse. Yeah. And I just wanted to meet her and know her as a good pastor.
Very good pastor. Pastor Godman, that's good. Can I jump in though?
Yeah.
How did you transition? Was there any sense of, I'm in a relationship, I really shouldn't be noticing anybody? Because there are people that have that struggle. It could be a relationship they went into because it was convenient, but at a point, they then started to realize that there's actually somebody else that they might have been attracted to, or they just realized I'm actually have a better friendship with somebody else. I'm curious how.
Actually, I consider myself to be a friendly person.
Right.
So I have lots of friends, online and offline, to my credit. So But before the advent of Facebook and
Yes.
Instagram, some of us have been known to carry thousands of friends.
Okay.
Yeah, without Facebook. So I belong to that category.
Okay.
I've always had
More sanguine,
a lot of,
more
yeah,
friendly.
Yeah.
a lot of friends.
Yeah.
You know, so I was just looking forward to adding another friend.
Right.
Yeah, I was in a good relationship
Yes.
and everything was going well.
Yeah.
Also, from my little experience at pastoring, then it's just one of those things that we've been taught to do. You meet somebody in church,
Yes.
you know, try to meet them, get
Yeah.
to know who they are, or you know. And then I was also this kind of pastor who used to look out for my guys and tell them, "Have you seen my servant
this
Job?" You know, all those kind of yeah.
Always ready,
Matchmaker.
always
Yeah.
ready to match me.
He
So,
was a matchmaker.
For me, I
Right.
was just looking like, if she's available
Let's
and there's
see.
a guy
Yeah,
that
he's-
is okay,
Yeah.
maybe I could do something, but much more than that. Let's even be friends. Let me know her. Let me know what she's doing in Lagos, you know,
Right.
and stuff like
Right.
that. So that was it.
Yeah.
It just so happened, if you permit me to transition quickly, it just so happened that after I met her,
Yes.
then my relationship, without even being friends with her at all,
all,
because
right.
we didn't become friends
Yes.
at all or anything
Mhm.
like that,
Mhm.
that relationship suffered, you know, a very bad fate in the
Yes.
sense that
Her
the
parents.
parents of, you know, my girlfriend or fiance then started to make trouble about why she shouldn't marry me. So
Right.
we didn't get parental consent.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was largely from her side.
Yes.
And her parents were very, you know, very
Adamant.
adamant
Yeah,
about,
yeah.
you know, her not going forward. And she just decided to obey her parents, nothing
Yes.
more than that. So
Yes.
our relationship did not break because
Yes.
of anything or because of
Yeah.
her.
Yep.
In fact, I didn't start to get close to her until like maybe 6-8 months after that.
Yes.
That was when we started really becoming friends.
Yes.
And it even took me time
Yes.
before I told her
Yes.
that this has happened, because
Yes.
I was enjoying that everybody
That
knew
time of
this
just
pastor was in a
friendship.
relationship, so
Yeah.
nobody was really trying to come close.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, and
And
she
I like
didn't
that.
also try to come close by any chance.
Yes.
I was the one that then went forward, you know, and
Yes.
said, you know what, this is my new status.
And I really like what you just said, because, and the reason why I thought it was an interesting point was that in what we have as the dating world, the lines are so murky. People are not sure how to process. At what point a lot of people are moved by their emotions. And that's why I loved the fact that you're able to define that, yes, there can be transitions in relationship, but there's a process to doing that, you know, and to make sure that at the end of the day, there's that level of integrity all around.
Integrity.
And it's very key. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So how did you finally say you're the one? At what point did you know that this is it? Or was it just, you just
So
transitioned?
you're asking me,
I'm asking you,
okay.
Pastor Godman.
You said you're
I'm
the one.
asking you.
She can't be too sure now.
In case you're
I
the one
could have,
in case you're the one that
actually.
said that God has told me you're the
But
one
that
for
didn't
me.
happen here. So you speak.
By the way, just you know, just as an aside, these days that line is, you know, becoming a bit blurry.
It
You know,
is.
people are saying that
Should the woman
should
Should
the
be the
woman
woman
say
to-
that
should be the
or
one
should
to-
the man
yes.
say it?
Yeah.
I think it has some cultural connotation, but scripturally speaking,
Yeah.
I'm not really sure that. Though the Bible says that he that finds a wife
Yeah.
finds a good thing, not he
Right.
that finds a
Or
husband.
husband, yes.
But becoming findable
Mm.
has some element of
Taking the
signaling.
initiative.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah. So somebody has been hanging around. This is just an aside as a relationship coach. I'm just saying this.
Okay.
It's not my question. All right. Somebody, you know, a lady has to make herself kind of findable.
right.
And one of that is for you to be able to say, oh, is this guy struggling? And is there a way I can help his faith to make a
Position.
move?
Right.
Not necessarily I making a move,
Right.
but you know, you can prod somebody. What are your plans
Send a
for the
signal,
future?
mm.
What ahead? You
Okay.
know, truth is that we're friends, and I do love you. There's no sin in telling somebody you love them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe he is struggling to be able
Right.
to say, I love you, because he thinks that saying it and you're
And
not feeling the
response.
same thing
Right.
may
Maybe
mean
death
rejection.
sentence,
Rejection.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
no, I get that.
yeah.
And that's a very good point.
So without saying I
Yes.
want to marry you,
Right. But you didn't struggle, did you, Pastor God?
No, there was a bit of struggle.
You're right.
I still remember very well the first time, the icebreaker day,
Yes.
which was, okay, so we were out to eat in a restaurant.
Mm.
Yeah, actually, just a fast food restaurant, not. Yeah, and as we were about to start to eat, I actually spoke to her about the fact that, oh, you know that relationship is no more, and all that, and I'm beginning to like you.
Mm.
That was my line.
That was your
You know,
line.
I'm beginning to like you, and all that. And she was just like, she was quiet. I think
Okay.
our cutlery dropped from her hand.
You weren't expecting that?
Yeah.
Not at all.
Okay.
And, because this story is very long, I'm just
Yes.
going to interject. Yeah. Now, when he mentioned that we got introduced months before this time, and again, I'd had that question in my heart. Okay, so why did you tell me he's a good man? I didn't know what to do with it. But
Right.
one thing I'd learned to do in my background as a Christian was to learn to wait.
Mm.
Now, I'm a very reserved sort of person, and you would think that waiting would be easy for me, but it's just, I just hate to wait. I hate, I'm such an impatient person, so that was a big lesson for God to teach me, learning to wait. So learning to hear this strange thing that God had told me about
Yes.
him and just not do anything about it.
Mm.
But I just thought, you know what, God, I'm not going to run ahead of you.
Yeah.
So when we eventually got introduced, oh, Bola, let me introduce you to your pastor this day, I thought, okay, how uncanny is this?
Is this?
But after that, I heard he was in a relationship,
Yes.
and like he said, integrity was a big deal for me.
Yes.
I was not going to get into all of that. So
Mm.
I just thought in my mind, okay, so God, you must have been telling me that he was going to be a good friend.
Right? Okay.
So I had sort of positioned myself in that space. We're not going there. We are
Mm.
not going to be the relationship wrecker.
Mhm.
We are not
Yes.
going to be that person.
Right.
Whatever God gave you as a word,
Mm-hmm.
he must have meant something with it. I don't have to force it.
Force anything.
So months down the line, he coming back and saying, I like you, my feelings are changing, it came from
out of
outer
the blue.
space. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how I felt.
Yeah.
It was coming from out of the blues. So it took us quite a bit of back and forth.
It's more than
For
18
you
months.
too.
Yes.
At least 18 months. Wow.
Yes.
More than that,
Wow.
actually.
Wow.
To
To actually get there.
Yes, to
That's
actually
interesting.
get to that place where
I
we
like that because we live in a very fast-paced society, After a couple of dates, where are we, what's going on,
Yeah.
the rest of it. So it's quite interesting and to know that even in all of that, that there was that time given to making sure that the foundations were well laid.
That didn't come
even-
easy though.
I'm sure it didn't, yeah. Must have
I
been
mean,
difficult.
because just hearing this, you may think, oh, these people are just really nice people. They give themselves 18 months to figure themselves out before. Nothing like that.
Yeah.
I was ready
Far from it.
to jump the ship,
So she
and
yeah.
all that. I fought a lot of distraction
Right.
because she just closed up and clamped up. And at a point, the friendship could not even really progress because I felt I'm becoming too old to just be doing friendship. I want to get married. Yeah, I have loads of
But
friends
she
already.
refused to be rushed.
Yeah.
And that
And I
was
think
my
I like
challenge with it. I mean,
Yeah.
just diving in with both things.
Right.
I want to marry you.
Yes.
What exactly do you want to marry?
so
Have you
important.
clearly identified that?
I really like that.
I thought it
That
was
it's
very
important,
important for
yes.
us to.
Yeah, that both of you, and I think before we just take a quick break, one of the things I really think it's so important from what I've just heard is, even when you feel you've heard, there is a place for making sure that you're both
Yes.
at that place where you're ready to take the
Yes.
next move,
Yes.
and the importance of being patient. And
Yeah.
it was difficult, not that it was easy, like you
Yeah,
said.
so
I think there's a lot of
the
value in that.
difficult part of it
Mm.
is being able to wait for each other.
Yes.
Like I said, I had to fight discouragement and distraction
Yes.
because it wasn't like there weren't other very nice
People.
ladies around then.
Right,
I
yeah.
mean, don't forget, I was this good pastor,
With the
So,
bow legs.
yeah.
With the bow legs. There's so much more that we have to
Oh,
talk about.
yes.
So I'm going to learn a bit more about that. We'll take a quick break. I'll be right back. Hi guys, we're back on today's episode of Behind the Pulpit, we have with us the lead pastors of Elevation Church, Pastor Godman and Pastor Bola Akinlabi. And we're getting more of a sneak preview into some of the goings on in the back end. And I want us to move forward to, after, that season of courtship and marriage and settling down. As we know, most couples, this is where, typically the first 5 years, what we call the marriage crisis, is where a lot of things start to come out as they're in close proximity to one another. So I'm just curious that what would you say were some of the things in the first year? Maybe tell me one thing. I'll start with Pastor Godman. One thing that you would say was, okay, I didn't see that coming. What did you notice about your wife? What was the differences in communication, your styles? That was a bit of a conflict, issue.
Well, thank you, Adenyke. One of the things I noticed in the first year, I noticed a lot.
I was going to say one thing.
Talk
about 10.
Actually, let's just put it out there.
Yeah, for instance, I noticed that my wife doesn't like to talk as much as I do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's an understatement.
Yes. Whether in good time or bad time.
Bad time.
Bad time is more terrible.
Yes.
So she just closes up completely. When there's a conflict, I like to talk about it. She likes to internalize it.
Yes.
And brood over it for some time before you can talk about it. I realize that talking about it is one of my own major ways of resolving conflict.
Yes.
When we talk about it and talk around it, I moved on.
That's right.
Yeah. So a lot, really. Should I continue?
I like that, in fact. And the interesting thing is that it's so critical because almost every couple can point to who wants to resolve. In my marriage, I'm the talk till we get to it. My husband talks and he tries to talk, and after a while, I'm not getting his point. Can we just talk about this tomorrow? And then I'm like, no, the sun must not go down. So yes, it's finding that place of agreement, and it's not that easy.
It's not so easy. I remember.
Do you feel you've changed a bit?
Oh boy, I've changed. As in, I've changed in such a huge way, and there is no way to properly really capture the growth that has happened.
Right.
Because one thing, for example, that he was too nice to talk about was the fact that in our early days of marriage, I could not say sorry. I could not say sorry to save my life. And for me, saying sorry was such an admittance of fault. Yes. And I am not at fault. Didn't you notice when you married me? I'm perfect. And we went through so many cycles of conflict and just trying to rationalize, and I'm the rationalizer, by the way. He wants to talk things out and just kind of deal with things. I want to rationalize, okay, how did we get to this point? How do we make sure we never get to this point again?
Without dealing with...
And he comes and he's like, oh, what happened yesterday, babe? I'm sorry. And I'm like, okay, what are you sorry for? Exactly. And that, I would just lose it. I would just lose it. Right. But coming to the place where I could see saying I'm sorry as not exactly an admission of guilt.
Right.
Sometimes it's neither your fault or mine.
Yes.
We just simply see things from different points of view, and it's okay to say, I'm sorry about how I made you feel in the middle of that discussion. Yes. It's not putting down arms and saying I surrender, I'm at fault. Yes. It is a gift of empathy that I'm giving. That was as simple as that was. It was such a huge leap in our relationship because I tell you today we're in a great place. We always say that we're not in a perfect marriage. Right. We don't have a perfect marriage, but we have something good. That's right. And I can see that a huge leap just came from that. Just simply being able to say, you know what? We don't always have to, it doesn't have to always be about who's wrong and who's right. Right. I'm just simply sorry that we're in this place, and I'm sorry about the hurt this has caused us. How do we navigate from here?
I love that. Simply put. And this can be replicated in different areas of conflict.
Oh, yeah.
If we bring it back to conflict resolution,
Yeah.
everyone is, some people, like they'll say, is the porcupine, just
Mm-hmm.
go
Curl
to their
up.
shelf and just spring out.
Porcupine alert.
And then the other person is the hedgehog. We've got to dig in, we've got to dig in, we've got to dig in. And so I think it's important for couples to have those skills. Now, how did you then, both of you trying to settle in marriage, then kids coming? Do you feel kids add a different dimension to this whole thing?
Definitely, yes. Any time you introduce a different object into any mix, it creates complexity. So it's complexity upon complexity. What two people are trying to juggle.
Yes.
Trying
You
to
introduce
settle.
another
That's
ball.
right,
You're
yes.
juggling two, becomes three, becomes four. So when we started having kids, I mean, by the way, we have two lovely girls.
Oh, lovely.
They're growing very fast now. Our first daughter is now a teenager. When our first daughter came, one of the rude awakening for me is that, okay, I have to participate.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
In the way she's brought up and
Yes.
all that. So I have to pick my own day of giving her a bath, and all that.
Yes.
Which I've never given a baby a bath before in my entire life, for over 30 years at that time, so, so I had to,
Start all of that.
start all of that, and learn that, and then it added to my schedule quite a bit, because my wife worked at the other side of the city, I worked at another side of the city.
Yes.
Our home was closer to where I worked,
Right.
so we got a crèche that is around my office building, so that I actually took my daughter to work. And my wife headed out to the island part of the city. So during the day, I was practically in charge of her. So I had to be able to call the crèche, how's she doing, going to work, park on the road, give her a feeding bottle, take care of her, change the nappy, and then take her home, and then she comes home to meet us at home.
Yes.
So that was sometimes, that was really funny.
That's a schedule.
Sometimes
yes.
That's tough.
I had late meetings,
Right.
and so I'm getting home at 8 p.m. and I'm with this baby that I've been with since 7 a.m. And
But I'm actually processing this and said, this is such an interesting angle that very few, and I'm not saying that it's unique to you, but not a lot of people, a lot of men see that. When you were speaking, as you said it, I could tell you lived it, because you just gave us a schedule. You just didn't put at 6 o'clock and drop at 4 o'clock, but you just broke down the schedule that went on for a while. And a lot of times we find couples where the wife doesn't feel very fulfilled or supported because she's working and she feels she still has to take most of the responsibilities with the children. And the husband might struggle with it and keeping the home front. It's a bit refreshing to know that it really is a partnership of how does this work for us, so that roles are not defined to say this is a woman's role or a man's role. Sounds to me that you very early in your marriage you did what worked.
I think it's good for couples, especially in the early days of their marriage, to become a bit open when it comes to the issue of roles. You can't eradicate the place of roles.
Yes.
We have to take roles.
Yes.
But to be open as to who can take this role.
How do we contextualize
follow
it?
the time of life and what should be part time. Because as at that time, I used to drive maybe about 15, 20 minutes to work, while my wife drove over an hour or an hour 30 minutes, sometimes 2 hours depending on Lagos traffic to work. So if she was going to get a crèche that was closer to our office, it meant that this my little infant daughter would drive through traffic for like an hour and a half and another an hour and a half back home.
Yes.
While she could get a better deal, which is drive with me for 20 minutes, another 20 minutes back home.
It's really being practical.
Very practical.
Couples need to be practical, especially in those formative years of settling. And it could be couples dynamics could change. It could be having a family member at home, having an elderly parent at home. It's knowing that who is best suited for this role per time for this season, and looking and having an arrangement to go back and say when things change, you both change. So nobody really feels cheated or that they're not appreciated in the marriage. So I wanted us to look at the life of both of you, then children. So another layer then came on it, because you married as a pastor. And if I'm correct, at some point you left work and went into full-time ministry.
He'd always done.
But at the
Yes,
time we were getting
we-
married,
Yes.
I was already in
Full-time.
full-time
Full-time,
pastor,
yes, right.
While she worked in the bank.
Right.
Yeah.
So what was the additional lens, if we bring the lens of ministry and the commitment required? Because it sounds to me, because this is where you hear people like, I can't really commit any additional time, you know, in terms of the work or the ministry, you know, I have a child, I have this. It's just, and it's not to, everyone has their story and their reality, but it's just interesting to see, you know, especially because I'm coming back to where you are now.
Yeah.
I can see some tracks that were being laid for where you are today. Pastor Bola, with your very busy schedule, thankfully Pastor Godman was able to provide a lot of support for the children. You had a second child.
Yeah.
How were you able to support and be involved in service, in ministry?
Through the different seasons we've been through, I guess it's been varied. It's been varied. So when we met as single people, I was in the choir. He was already a pastor.
Yeah.
We got married, had our first child. It became a little difficult to keep up with the choir, so I took a bit of a hiatus from the choir, and then I served with marriage counseling, family life. I also served with the women's ministry, just to sort of take things at a different pace and just kind of cope with everything that was going on at the time. But it's interesting that as we progressed along the line, he got more and more, he got much busier, you know, with his responsibilities with Daystar. And I remember this one year, I know there was a building project going on in church then in Daystar, and it was so intense. Some days he'd come home midnight, past midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It wasn't unusual for him to come home at those hours because there was a project ongoing, and he had to make sure that things pulled through. And one of those days I was praying and just kind of frustrated about the fact that I didn't feel like I had a husband. I didn't feel like, you know, he was doing his part to support me emotionally or otherwise. And I remember that I just kind of got this impression in my heart, God saying, don't be Rachel. Now, it was a little confusing because my middle name is Rachel. It actually is my middle name. So I'm like, God, what are you saying here? Don't be Rachel, don't be me, what, how? But at least I had enough sense to just go back to the Bible and just kind of read the whole account of Rachel's life. And it's interesting about Rachel. Rachel's life seemed to be a constant struggle to grab what was already hers.
Right.
She didn't have to struggle for her husband's love. All those discussions with Leah, oh, the mandrakes or no mandrakes, oh, let's pawn him off. You have him for 2 nights, have him. I mean, the Bible was so clear about the fact that she completely and utterly had owned Jacob's heart, as it were. It was hers completely. And it was like God telling me that, look, you're struggling with me for this guy. For my guy. Stop struggling. I want you to be secure in the fact that if I brought you guys together, I have great things in my heart planned for you. But if I need him now for this assignment to be completely in this, sold out to this, I need you to be secure enough in the fact that I gave him to you to begin with, and not struggle with me for his attention. So struggling with me for his love, for his commitment. It was
one of those moments, and I can identify with what you've said from a perspective of how a lot of women process, because every woman goes through that period of time where they feel they need to mark their territory and all of that. And it's interesting that you found your word and the solace and the confidence you required from the Lord, because there's only a limit to what a spouse, a wife, or a husband can give, and it's important. That third person in your marriage was able to just calm the waters.
Calm the
waters,
like that
very
absolutely.
much. I'll take a quick break. There's quite a lot that we still need to talk about, but we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Hi everyone. So on Behind the Pulpit, you know, one of the things that we're very particular about and we want to address and to talk about is the issue of leadership and marriage and just being able to build a strong foundation. A lot of times we see ministers doing so much, but we don't always recognize the importance that they also have to have a strong marriage even in their roles as leaders. And I'm so excited that as we've been talking today with the Godman, well, Pastor Godman, Pastor Bola Akinlabi, let me put it that way. I was tempted to say the Goodmans because he's a really good man. A lot of things have come out, a lot of themes have come out that I really wanted to explore. Because one of the things that I know is very important to both of you is service and service to God. And you just talked about, just that period of having to juggle and step back when you served in Daystar.
Yeah.
But at a point, Pastor Godman, you must have heard the Lord tell you to even take it up a notch, take it up, that there's a work for you to do. What was that process like? And when I'll let you tell me, but when you heard, I'm curious did you hear anything as well? How did that happen? Because most times you have one, mostly the husband, who would hear a word. And I'd love to know how you were able to get to that place of both of you starting off Elevation Church.
Well, I'll say somewhere around 2007, I remember we were at a prayer meeting where my pastor was telling us that, God was putting in his heart that God wanted to use some of us to plant independent churches. And then we were just to pray, we were just praying. And this time where I got into this time where I couldn't control myself in a certain way, I just felt like maybe something was pulling me off. So I started crying, and I didn't know why I was crying. I guess I was crying out of fear, or some kind of trepidation, things that you just couldn't explain. Right. And it wasn't more than that. We finished that prayer meeting, and I remember a few days later, my pastor called me and asked me, why were you crying so much, at that prayer meeting? And I said, well, I can't explain it. It's just that I just felt something strange, and that was it, So, but fast forward 3 years later, we had, 2 years later, 2009, we had another talk, and it was that talk that culminated into the idea of, me stepping out boldly to plant the Elevation Church. Around that time, I started sharing that with my wife also, and I guess our response really initially was that she was open, yes, but not completely, as in that idea of, okay, I think we need to pray a bit more.
Lord,
I
help
think
my
you need
faith.
to.
So, what were your reservations?
I think at that point it was, again, going back to my history as a Christian, I just wanted to have a word. Right. I'll go anywhere with you, God. Just give me a word, something I can lean on, because I knew enough at that point to know that when God gives you a word, it doesn't guarantee you smooth sailing. You are going to need to go back to that word. Yes. And I guess that was it for me. I just wanted to have some bit of clarity, about this is what God is saying about where we're going. Right.
And it looks like when that word came, you both went powerfully.
Interestingly, just so that I don't confuse someone who is thinking, okay, yes, I was right, I must wait until I hear something specific. It wasn't a God said you may now go out and start a church. It didn't come like that for me. So around that 2009 season that he mentioned, a number of pastors in Daystar were also released to go and start, new initiatives. Some planted new churches. But the day I recall that it was announced in church that, okay, these pastors have left now and he was going to be the resident pastor. It was like a wind, some strange wind that just kind of blew over me. And it was like, the curtains are drawn now. You're you're on stage now. And I'm like, what stage? He said, no, you are on stage now. Wow. And I'm like, okay, so God, what should I be doing? And it was like, go back to the choir. That's all he said to me, just go back to the choir. So at that time, of course, I was still trying to, I thought I had reached an equilibrium space, where I was serving with the women's ministry, I was doing some marriage counseling, family life thing, and then family, I thought, okay, I'm good. Yes. I am giving unto the Lord and I'm sorting out family life. But here he was telling me, no, you need to go back to the choir. And that's what I did. I simply just, it will never be easy. It will never seem like I have all this time on my hands. but go back. So I remember going back and talking to the music director then to explain, you know what, Thursday music rehearsals might be a bit of a struggle for me, coming all the way from my office on a good day, a Thursday. It will take me about 2.5 hours at least to navigate to church, and at which point I'm just coming to get the closing prayer or something. But we found a way to make it work. Saturday rehearsals, I was there.
Right.
And in that place of, okay, God, you told me to come back here. I'm here. What next?
What next?
It began to be clear to me that he was saying, you're not going to do things the way everyone does things. You're just going to be content to hear what I want you to do and just do that. So there was never a, okay, now thou shalt go and start church. Right. It's okay, stop giving my son grief, you know, and all of that. But it was kind of like a peace that came from, okay, I knew he told me to go back to the choir, and I went there, and he met me there, and I saw him push me out of my comfort zone and force me to just kind of do the things that I used to be uncomfortable with. And in the trial of that and just doing that, it became clearer to me that, yes, this was absolutely the next step for us.
You know, each time you, it's like the way our conversation is going, I hear Pastor Godman just talk about how very clearly the word, the instances, his experience, and then in a very different way, your experience. And I think it's so important that in a marriage, one of the things that, you know, we're saying is that God wants to have that session, so to speak, with both of you. It's not rushed. I think it's so important that every couple give a place to patiently ensuring that they're both comfortable. It's almost like how your courtship went.
Yes,
you had to wait till you were both in the same place, although it was difficult.
Yeah.
And I think for me, from an outside perspective, I see that as one of the strengths of your marriage, than a strength that every marriage should draw from. That is, you know, that loving patience as you both grow. Because sometimes you find one growing faster than the other.
If I can jump in
Yes,
there, I think it's absolutely important for people to understand whether you're called to be ministers or you run a business or you're on a career path. You want your marriage to work well.
Right.
You need to understand the seasons and times of life.
Yes.
You need to understand that you know, it was just like when God was leading Israel out of Egypt into the promised land. The Bible says he led them about, and there was a path that I could have taken them through, but he said maybe they're not strong enough to take that path.
Yes.
You know, I think it was also Jacob going back home, you know, after his sojourn in Laban's house. There was also a way he arranged things, and he said, you know, you go like this, go like that, let them go softly, you know. That kind of, there's a need for us to always have that sense of empathy and sense of understanding with the other person. I mean, for instance, right in 2010 when the Elevation Church started, we had a discussion, and my wife told me what she was comfortable with doing. So don't put me in this stereotype of pastor's wife, mother in Israel kind of thing. I just want to be myself. I want to serve the choir. So it's the first time I was seeing the pastor's wife that was a backup singer in the choir. And that was what she did for maybe like the first 2 years or so of our church. And, you know, I had other associates who were doing more of the pulpit stuff. She was just not. She was happy where she was. She was just happy where she was.
Nice.
And so, but I had to understand not to put her in that stereotype and just allow her to be. And a few times she's had to just allow me to be the man of God. You know?
Man of God.
Or whatever I felt it was that it was good enough for me at any point in time. I mean, it's been a lot of work trying to obey God in setting up a new ministry, and then, you know, getting on the media, planting churches, you know, going itinerant ministry, a bit of missions, and, you know, I do a lot of traveling, and we do a bit of traveling together within the year, but a lot of my trips I still had to go alone, and it's just that bit of understanding with each other, allowing each other to serve at your pace per time.
Yes. Yeah. So that brings me to a very key question, because I can see that your schedule went to another level from what you've just described. At this stage, your children are no longer in diapers,
infants,
and their needs are also there, and they now need to have mom, have dad around. With the pool of ministry, how did you then create boundaries? Just practical ways. How do you create boundaries to make sure that the pool of the ministry does not have a negative impact on the home, and even with home front, it's not drawing you back? I mean, some people leverage on different types of delegation and all of that, but what are some of the practical things you had to do to just maintain that?
I'm going to allow my wife to say one or two things, but just before then, let me just drop this, and she could just, you can just ride on it.
Yes.
There's basic things that we had put in place as
we agreed on.
You know,
them
we agreed
from
on
the
as a matter of
beginning.
principle from beginning one, that we're going to spend our annual vacation together until the kids maybe get into their 20s, and maybe our taste for vacation then starts to change.
Right.
And then maybe we can allow them to vacation differently. Then I'll start to enjoy my wife all by myself alone on vacation. So that's there, and we've kept that for years now. So at least the kids look forward to that time in the year where for about 2.5 to 3 weeks, about 3 weeks, they're with us alone. They look forward to that. At a point in our lives, we also kind of put something in place where we had to take our kids to school ourselves. It was just in the last year, after our first daughter became a teenager, and the other one is almost a teenager too, that we felt, okay, we've always taken them to school, school runs ourselves, take them to school, mostly also pick them ourselves. So now they can get on the bus, you know, and all that, and join the school bus, you know. So things like, you know, creating time to do their homework with them. My wife has been a lot more faithful with that, you know, than me. Sometimes we have a ministry engagement, and we have to weigh it to say, look, one of us going will get the job done.
Right. Yep.
So that one person can stay and sort out the kids. You know, so there are invitations we get. There are places I go, and they will say, you should come with your wife. And I'll get there, I'll say, my wife can't make it. We have other responsibilities with the kids, so she had to stay back. Some other times, we just agree. I may be the one to stay at home where she will go somewhere. So a bit of that here and there.
And I think I feel that's extremely important. And if I can ask you, Pastor Bola, how do you manage the boundaries of the church? So there's a boundary that you can have for the family, but how do you lovingly, as pastors, still push back a bit when the demands of your, should we call members of the congregation, we want to have counseling with just pastor, we want to just do this, you know, although I know you have ministers in place, but you know, the demand for you to be at every naming ceremony, you get all the invitations to every wedding. So just the life, just the members of church wanting you as part of their lives because they're excited also is a pull on you, and being able to, how do you delicately manage that? Because you can't be everywhere.
I think one thing I'll say I've learned, but I'm still learning. You know, it's still a struggle. You know, one thing I've learned to do is to schedule time with my family. You know, even where my husband has to be out of the house, you know, away for whatever reason, to schedule it. It's an appointment on my appointment book.
That's right.
It's not something that can just shift because anyone wants room on my schedule, and to value it as something important. So our schedules right now will mean that we're not here every evening with the girls to put them to bed. There are meetings and engagements that we have to be at. But to ensure that a week does not go by where we haven't at least 2 times or 3 times been there with them to just kind of ask how was school, and not just from the point of view of I can just go through their schedule and see what's been done, but to ask them what are some of the softer issues that are going on, what is going on that if I wasn't here to ask you about it, you wouldn't be able to tell me. I want to know about that
going on in
person
their
who
lives.
sat behind you
Exactly.
and just kind of shifted your head a little bit,
Yes,
and how
yes.
it came across to you, and to make sure you're dealing with it the right way.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, to deliberately schedule it,
Put that
it's an
schedule in place.
important item on my calendar.
Yes.
And if I need to take a phone call where I'm saying, oh, I'm sorry, I can't meet with you on this time by 5 o'clock. I have another appointment there.
Exactly.
That
It's
is
valid.
I have an appointment.
Yes, you
and
do.
I'm molding these young people.
Yes.
So it's that important to me. I put it side by side with some of the other engagements I try to pull.
Excellent. I like that. I like that. Everyone scheduling, it's important to schedule life.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh, well, we'll be right back, and there's still so much that we need to talk about. But as we round up, one thing I'm very interested when we come back from the break is the issue of legacy. I find that that's not a conversation that we hear a lot about, so I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back. It's been a very interesting show today as we've talked about marriage and looking behind the pulpit, behind our typical, what we see in our typical churches, and having our pastors actually talk about their life experience. Most of you know that we've been having a very wonderful conversation with Pastor Godman and Pastor Bola Akinlabi of Elevation Church, and I think it's really been a very insightful time. There's some things that you've shared about your marriage, and that's very real, and actually shows what everybody probably in the congregation too have experienced. But one thing I also know, that I know that Pastor Godman is also very passionate about marriage. I know you have a show, Mr. and Mrs. Better Half, and it's always quite engaging. I've seen a couple of the episodes. So because of that, I would the way the US president would always have to give the State of the Union speech. I'm curious, what would you say is the State of the Union when we talk about the marriage union, especially in our culture, in this part of the world where we're in?
Well, I'll say that the State of the Union is, I won't say that we've made so much progress because the wind, the waves have been beating on the ship,
Yes.
and not leaving the ship in a very stable stable place. So let me start with the singles. The way you live your single life or your singlehood has direct impact on how you're going to turn out in marriage.
Right.
A lot of singles feel like I can do anything I like as a single person.
Yes.
When I get into marriage, everything will course correct. Everything will fall in
Adjust
place.
itself.
Yeah. The past, the present, and the future are intricately connected.
That's true.
You can't separate them.
Mm.
Yeah. So you have to be mindful of the present, because the present will soon become
The future.
will soon become your past,
Your past, sorry.
and then the future becomes your present.
Your present,
So
that's true.
the interplay is always there. So when I decide to live anyhow in the present,
Yes.
it just messes up,
Everything
many more
It has
things. So
impact.
I mean, for
Yes.
instance, we realize that in marriage counseling and doing the show and interviewing people, most often now, like you get like maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 intending couples have slept together. Yeah. So sex out of marriage is on the increase. And thanks to the media, social media, and the fact that obscene pictures, pornography, and all other avenues for for bad behavior has increased. Because online now you can get anything you want. Back in the day, for you to have access to porn, you have to go buy a book. Now it's served into your home.
Yes.
Like we all have electricity and gas and all that piped into the home. What you have ready
On their
access to,
phones.
you don't have to struggle for it. You carry it everywhere.
Right.
So there's porn on mobile phone, and all that. So it's wearing away a lot on the fabric of family values and our conscience and all that. So so you see a lot of that on the single side. On the married side is that living in the metropolis, fast-paced life, our quest for success and career progression. Everybody wants to live their life and all that, and we're not paying attention as much as before. to the marriage. Distractions of technology, social media, you know, and all that, people are torn in different directions.
Yeah.
So you have husband and wife, and all they do for a week is just to WhatsApp each other, do this to each other, no real physical contact, no engaging conversation, the culture of dating your spouse again, and, you know, all that is gradually fading out. I just feel like, oh, maybe if I just WhatsApp my wife, so that's okay for her.
Connected with her for the day.
You know, that suffices, and let's go on. So all that is really negatively impacting on the union. So that's why I would say that there's so many negative interactions going on with the state of the union. So the union is neither here nor there, but more like we're drifting. And then let me just layer this on top of it. Also, the fact that the way we think affects how we live. We can't separate them. And when somebody says something and you believe it, it affects the way you think. Invariably, it's going to affect the way you live.
Right.
So today, even amongst the so-called Christians who are fully devoted followers of Jesus, I'm not talking about nominal Christians, divorce has become much more acceptable than before. We all know what the scripture says about divorce. But we know life happens to us.
Yes.
And we know that some people don't want to be divorcees, but they end up being that because of just life issues and all that. But should we communicate it as an acceptable way to live is a different ballgame. Because people who can then persevere a little bit more, hold on a little bit more, engage a little more tact, go for counseling, you know, just pray a bit more, get into your war room and pray, or even let go of your pride,
humility, all
but
of those
because
values.
they now have reference points, in good people who suffered, you know, the bad fate of divorce, and maybe they've moved on, maybe they've remarried again, maybe somebody's in his third marriage. I mean, we live in a time and age where third marriage, fourth marriage is no longer something weird. It's just it's just it's becoming a norm. And so our resistance to adversity in marriage has really become very, very low. At any, you know,
than any other time.
Just any issue at all can make someone contemplate a divorce. So it's not putting us in a very good place.
And I really love that analysis. We looked at it from the different angles, and just to show that everyone, you know, when we look at this state of the union, it's important that going in or just coming out, everyone has a part to play in it, and in the impact it has, and what we're modeling to next generation, you know. And so what would you say would be some of the principles, maybe one or two principles that, you know, I know there's a lot, but if we could just look at some very practical things, especially given that synopsis that you really gave, especially the impact of technology, of our access to being a global village. What are some principles that are landmarks that cannot be shaken, that we can still implement, and we can see a healthy union?
One principle I think is crucial to both building and sustaining a strong marriage that will stand the test of time, for me would be communication. And it might sound cliche. We all come back. You can't have a discussion about marriage without coming back to communication, but I mean it's just so pivotal.
Yes.
And because we all communicate in different ways, we are fooled into thinking that, oh, I've passed the message across. I took an early course in university on communication, mass communication, and that was the first time I got introduced to the fact that the responsibility for communication is on the person who is trying to get the message across.
Right.
So very often in marriage, we think, oh, he should have gotten the point. I said that. You have to take responsibility for ensuring that both the what, the why, the where, the how of that communication reached the intended party.
Yes.
It's not his responsibility to dig up what I'm saying.
Yes.
And having
That's
said that, of
interesting.
course,
Yeah.
in relationships, there is room for each of us going the extra mile, yes,
Right,
and trying
yes.
to help the other person communicate more effectively. But just each of us, we need to take responsibility
Right.
for ensuring that what I mean to say and what I mean to communicate is getting across. Now, how that comes across for me as your melancholic type personality will be different from the way it comes across, you know, as the sanguine type person in our relationship. I mean, I say it often that he has talked enough for all of us, you know. But even then, in trying to weave through the communication, all the things he has said, for me, how this comes across for me in our relationship is, so he talks for, say, a 5-minute stretch. I need to, okay, so I don't like the way he's saying it, because sometimes his communication comes in a puff of, you know, emotion. I don't like the way he's saying it, but can I find the nuggets of information there that he's trying to pass across? That's, for me, the extra. On my side, he's trying to force all this information out because he needs to feel like we are speaking, and learning to say, you know what, I haven't figured it out, and because I haven't figured it out, I can't really engage with you the way you would like us to engage. But suffice it to say that this occurred, these are the bits I still need to process. If you will please give me some time, I will come back to you. And then learning to actually come back. You know, that has to finish it, to come back. So I would say communication. We don't have to become someone we're not. We will still communicate out of the model of who we are. But we need to learn how to be more effective in that space.
Yes. I think you've captured it. There's a lot we could talk about, but communication is the blood, what we'll call as blood is to a body, that's what it is to a relationship. And I think one of the things that I love about what you just said is, you know, my pastor, so-called Pastor G, always says that marriage is for two matured people. He always says that. Because what you've just described takes maturity. You really just took time to separate the person from the issue in everything you've just said. And I think that's so key. We put things on each other. Someone says something, we forget the issue and we just feel attacked, and all of that affects it. I think that's just brilliant. It's brilliant. And, you know, I wish I could just, there's so much I'd love to just engage more and, you know, have you and Pastor Godman share more. But Pastor Godman, if I can just have you just tell us, how would you say, I believe every marriage should leave a legacy behind. And I know a lot of people might struggle that, what does that mean? I don't believe that we're here to just get married, have our children, and it's all about our lives and having a life that works, that's beautiful, and the rest of it. We're all part of a large ecosystem. We're all part of God's body, and we all have an impact. What would you say when it comes to marriage, leaving a legacy for your children, your community, your extended family? What sort of legacies do you think we should be considering? Maybe you can use something that you both have as your passion or a legacy as an example.
Well, I'll say that there are many areas, you know, things that could constitute a legacy that a couple can leave behind. One is what you're leaving behind for your children. Our younger daughter asked the question once, and the question was very direct and simple. Are we rich? And it was a Saturday morning. It was unexpected. I didn't know, out of the blues. I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know
what angle.
Because if I said yes, I don't know what request will come. If I said no, I don't know how that. Yeah. So while I was still trying to figure it out, my wife was in the room and she just jumped right in. You know, she's a good helpmate. So she just jumped in and she was like, young lady, we are rich, but maybe not the way you are, you know, trying to figure it out. We're rich in people. Yeah. And when you are rich in people, you are rich in everything.
Oh, beautiful.
And then the young lady was looking at her like,
That's not what I was
okay.
thinking, but
Okay, yeah. So then we then layered on that
yeah.
to be able to explain to her that it's better that you're reaching people,
Yes.
that you cultivate and build a community of people around yourself.
People who love you.
People who love you.
Who
People who
you.
support you.
Yes.
People who can forgive you. People
Yes.
who can do stuff for you. People who believe in you.
We'll be there
And
for
can
Yeah.
give you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is so crucial.
Yeah.
Those are intangible wealth.
Yes, and that human beings are more important than money.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So how we make money,
It's brilliant.
how we spend money,
Yes.
how we manage money
Yes.
should all point to that overriding principle that human beings are more important than money.
Wow.
That the Sabbath was not made, man was not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made for man.
Yes.
So humans are very important.
Yes.
The legacy of having good relationship, modeling it from home,
Yes.
and portraying
So
good
key.
companionship. Because marriage is companionship
Yes.
much more than any other thing. So we can't model a marriage to our kids without real good companionship. I mean, on my Twitter show, the Better Half
Yes.
stuff, I was preparing for one recently where we're talking about why something about living in the same room. Yeah, the marriage bed. I mean, is it still a marriage bed if a man and his wife, they live in different rooms? Which one is the marriage bed? Is it the madam's room or the man's room? You know, and stuff like that. And you know, my take on that simply is, I mean, we can't force you to live in the same room,
Yes.
but how is your companionship?
Right.
Is it impacting negatively on your companionship? If that's the case, then you better move into the same room.
So true.
I am of the opinion that being in the same room will definitely impact positively
Yep.
on companionship.
Correct.
Even if you are rubbing off on each other wrongly and there's a bit of conflict, it's not by going like this that
Right.
will correct the conflict. It's like when you use sandpaper on something. It's
Both
to-
edges get
yeah,
smoother.
you know,
Right.
both edges will get
Yes,
smoother,
smoother.
and then you can connect better.
That's true.
So that legacy of companionship, valuing people,
Yes.
paying attention to people, meeting the needs of people, and generally living for people.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful legacy.
yeah.
I now I have something that I'm going to take off you. That is so true and that is so rich. And I want to say a big thank you for being guest on Relationship with Adenyke. Thank you for joining us in the episode of Behind the Pulpit. Thank you for opening up your home for us to see really behind what goes on, and just the how real it's been. I know if we had much more time, there's so many angles, but this has been a very enriching moment, and I really want to appreciate you for it. Thank you.
Thank
And I'd like to thank everyone who has joined us today. I'm very sure that there's a lot that we've heard that will be of benefit in our own lives. But the one key thing that struck me in our conversation today is really that marriage is just a place where two people who are imperfect have come together to create what is their perfect world. And what's your perfect world might not be perfect for another couple, but as long as you both work together and you both leave a legacy of enriching other people's lives, you always end in a good place. Thank you so much. I look forward to coming to your screens another time. For more information about the show, please see, you can reach us on any of our handles that's displayed on the screen. Thank you and have a lovely time. Bye.